Hey everybody, welcome to Black Petal Gardening. Today we are going to hopefully get some significant things done here in the garden. We need to knock down our tomato plants. They're still producing, but they're definitely producing at a level that we can't keep up with, and we already have so many in the freezer. Um, we could potentially keep one or two of the ones that we enjoy the most, but we'll have to see about that. We still have our dwarf ones, which are hit or miss at the moment, and those ones we're going to keep in play. But the main bed we're going to clear of as many of the tomatoes as we feel is appropriate. The other piece we're going to be cleaning up are these tomatoes here as well. We're going to get the sunflowers out and probably pull this one down too. And then we're absolutely going, even though we have some new growth, we have flowers, we're going to take this cucumber down because as you can see, it is riddled with powdery mildew. Similarly, we have already pulled out our zucchini and we're going to take down the yellow squash. One, we have a ton of it, and two, again, powdery mildew everywhere. We will assess our acorn squash to see A, where we're at, and B, do we need to do either some strategic trimming or pull out a fair amount of it. We do have some um, juvenile squash in here, and I don't know if I want to sacrifice those or not. So that'll be part of the decision making process. All right, so here are the results of our first pass. You can actually see the surface of the raised bed. We have created this huge pile here, and you can see there are some tomatoes that are on the vine, but as I mentioned, if there is no blush whatsoever, they're being sacrificed essentially. Scott also took care of the dragon egg cucumber. We did have two plants there of that nature. We left the cucamelons because they seemed to be in okay condition. I don't think we saw much in the way of um, powdery mildew on those, so we'll have to keep an eye on it, of course. But those are taken down. Here's kind of what we were able to harvest that seemed harvestable. There's some questionable ones in there for sure. What we're going to do now is we're going to work on the Brad's Atomic tomato that's over in there and get that cleared out, and then we will come back here and pull out the main parts of these tomato plants. I felt it would be much easier for us to get, that just mess of vines out of the way so we could actually see what's going on and then work on the main plants as well as do some cleanup, because as much as I like the idea of free plants, I don't want to plant tomatoes in this bed again. I want to do a crop rotation process, so next year we will plant tomatoes somewhere else. Obviously, you can't necessarily subvert nature all the way. So there's been tomato drop. There's going to be seeds in here, and so we'll have to keep an eye on that. But that's where we are so far. Okay, so we have cleared out the Brad's Atomic over here. We also did a little bit of cleanup because there was a lot of fruit drop from that particular tomato, and apparently our efforts also disturbed a bunch of ants, so we had to battle those climbing all over us. We took out the two teddy bear sunflowers. We'd already harvested a few of the heads, and we just decided we didn't want any more of the others. The sunspot, look at this, how thick this trunk is. I mean, for a dwarf sunflower, I think that's pretty impressive. We do have some offshoots that I'm trying to decide if it makes sense to keep in place, especially since we do have some young flowers on them. I don't know. Oh, this guy is pretty heavy. You can see here. I've already taken a couple of these off to throw into the back area of our garden where we have our bird feeders, and we harvested the two biggest heads so that those can dry out, and we're going to try and, like roast the sunflowers from those. I'm going to give this a little bit more of a think, but my thought is I'm probably just going to trim these off, toss them to the birds, and then pull out the rest of the stump. But yeah, progress is definitely being made. Okay, so we have made a ton, an absolute ton of progress. All of the tomatoes have now been pulled. We pulled out all of the sunflowers. As I mentioned, some of them we saved a few heads to see if we can't roast process them and roast the seeds for ourselves. But a good chunk of them we put out further back where our bird feeders are, and hopefully the birds will be able to use and enjoy those. I think one thing that I've decided is in the future, I am not going to put sunflowers in the raised beds. These were dwarf, and you can see already here that there was a huge soil displacement because of them. So yeah, I think it'll be better for us to see if we can't find someplace, probably back in the old garden area that we're refurbishing, to plant them actually in the ground. Here you can see we pulled out our two dragon egg cucumbers, the cucamelon or Mexican sour gherkin. Those don't seem to have any of the powdery mildew, so we left those in place. We did pull out all of our squash. The yellow squash that we had, which you can't see what that is. I think that was hybrid gentry. It had just created, like 3 or 4 offshoots, and so constantly generating squash, which is great, but we're only 2 people. So we have plenty of yellow squash, so we called that for the year. The zucchini, which wasn't quite as prolific as some people had, we pulled that too. It had both of those, the summer gentry and the zucchini was black something, I can't remember what it's called. Those also had powdery mildew on them. Scott also made the call to pull out his black bolota, which is a type of an acorn squash, a winter squash. He has, I would say, 8 or 9 squashes. There were some that were immature still, but he's the only one that likes that squash. So being mindful, we didn't want to overburden ourselves with stuff. There's not a lot of people in my family that like squash, so our options of who we could drop squash off to is also a little bit limited. So he made the decision, yes, let's pull it out. So we pulled it out. So now in this bed, the only thing that we have going still is the tomatillo, which the bees are absolutely loving, and our Yellow Mountain sweet watermelon, which is supposed to be able to get to, like 12 to 15 pounds. Obviously, it hasn't. I don't know if that's because it was overrun by all the squash stuff or some other reason, but it's still there, growing and doing what it needs to do. We'll see if the fact that this bin has opened up will make a difference. It does look like there's some powdery mildew on some of the leaves though, so that size right there may be it. and it'll just be a matter of letting it mature a little bit more. Okay, over here in the tomato bed, you know, it's amazing to think that we had, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think we had about 12 or 13 tomato plants in here. So, lesson learned, that's way too many. We have decided for next year that we will be doing one of the Black Beauty plants, one of the Anans Noir. We will be doing the Juliet, which we really like. It's a Roma type tomato that does have kind of a cherry growing pattern, so it can kind of sprawl a little bit. San Marzanos, we want to get a couple of those, and that is going to be it for the tomato plants that we have tested in this bed. We're not going to do the black strawberry again because it is a type of cherry. It was too much vigor of the plant and just too much of the fruits, and we don't really have a great way to use all of those. We are not going to do sun golds again. We've done it multiple years, and it again is just so prolific, and we don't have a lot of ways to use those little cherry tomatoes. So we're going to save the space that it would take for something else. We are getting to the point where we are trying out our dwarf tomatoes, and today I pulled some of our Stony Brook Heart. We have 2 of those plants, and we're going to try those out, see how well we like them. Depending on the verdict for those, whether we like certain ones in particular, we may either do them again in containers or add them to the mix for the raised bed. We are going to be smart about it next year. I think I outlined 5 plants that we want to do for tomatoes. We are not going to share a bed with peppers. We're going to have an entire bed that's just tomatoes, and I think we could accommodate, maybe for an entire bed, 10 tomato plants, even if they are indeterminate and a little rangy. 12 to 13 in a smaller area was not wise. I'm gonna say 10 will have to be the absolute limit. I may even just say 8 for an entire bed. We'll have to see how it kind of looks once the new spring season comes, but that's kind of the goal. So potentially 3 more plants from the dwarf side of things, which will also help with spacing because they won't get very big, depending on how we like them. Oh, I am not going to be doing the yellow squash again next year. There's nothing wrong with the plant. The food was just fine. We both like to eat them, but I felt that it was too prolific for how many people are in the family, and you can only drop those off to folks so much. So with an effort of not wanting to waste food, not wanting to make more work for ourselves that we're not going to be able to utilize the end result of, we won't be doing those this year. That's not to say we won't do them again sometime further in the future, but next year we won't be doing the summer squash. So that'll open up more space for something else. Okay, here's the result of us pulling out the Brad's Atomic and the sunflowers. We looked at this a little bit earlier. Brad's Atomic, we are not going to do those again. They are, again, kind of a Roma type cherry as far as how rangy they are. So too big, too much, and don't really have a great use for them. Right now, the thought is the ones that we have, and the ones that we saved from pulling down all this stuff are going in the freezer with a lot of other ones because there's just so much. But the thought for those is because they do have a fairly green tinge to them, even when they're getting ripe and they have, their streaking, their colorful streaking, is maybe make them into a salsa verde. So that's kind of the thought for those. You can see how our fall garden is going. We don't have a ton of carrots, but there's some. Our beans are looking pretty healthy. I think they may have gotten a little bit overrun by the tomatoes, so hopefully by taking those out, we have opened stuff up. Obviously, our cosmos are doing great. I have a sneaking suspicion that we will have some self-seeded cosmos for next year in this bin. And this has also opened up space for our snapdragons and the black scabiosa to hopefully continue to grow and flourish. So that is that. Now we need to we need to plant our daikon radishes. I want to put some more cauliflower in. I still haven't done a second sowing of the cauliflower, so I want to get that in. And we want to put in our butter crunch again. We had it in here last for the spring, and it really seemed to do very well. There's a little less space than we had before, but I think we can weave up the vines for the cucamelons, and that'll give us a little bit more room, and hopefully we'll have enough time for those to get going and be on their way before it gets too cool. All right, that's it for today's update of things that we've done in the garden. And yeah, get these dang cabbage moths out of here. We did do, I don't know if you can see, there's a bunch of stuff in the background. We did a pruning of the plum, the Santa Rosa plum. We have not pruned the Brooks because I don't feel that it's too overrun yet. I think next year we're going to have to take a serious look at that one, make sure that, it's got some good airflow and not a lot of crisscrossy branches and stuff like that. So, okay. On that note, I am going to say goodbye. So I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.